shadow under the bed. Enjoy the video and have a good sleep. It started with the whispers. Quiet, almost imperceptible, like the sound of wind brushing through dry leaves. But the wind never blew, not inside his bedroom. Ethan tried to dismiss the noise at first. He had just moved into the small cottage on the edge of town. An old house with creaky floors and a musty smell. A place where everything seemed to be constantly shifting and settling. The kind of house where the walls seemed to breathe with a life of their own. He'd been living there for a week when it began. At first, it was so faint he thought it was just the house settling. A creak here, a sigh there. It was an old house, after all. He'd lie in bed at night, the covers pulled tight around his chest, trying to ignore the faint, soft scratching coming from beneath the bed. It wasn't anything to be concerned about, he told himself. Maybe it was the wood, rubbing against the floor, or the pipes, expanding and contracting in the cold night air. But then came the breathing. The first night, he thought it was his imagination. But the sound was so close, so personal, as if someone was crouching underneath him, breathing through their nose in slow, deliberate inhalations. It was the kind of sound that made his skin prickle, that made his heart thud against his ribs. He sat up in bed, staring into the dark corner of the room where the bed frame met the floor. But there was nothing there, just shadows. He told himself it was nothing. But the second night, the breathing came again. And this time, it was louder. Ethan shifted uneasily under his blankets, the sounds growing clearer, more defined. A sharp intake of air, followed by a long, shuddering exhale, like someone trying to catch their breath after running a great distance. He swallowed thickly, his throat dry, and glanced down at the bed, hoping, praying that when he looked, he would see nothing, nothing at all. But there was something. A faint, dark outline, a shape, as though the darkness under the bed was alive, swirling and coiling in on itself. Ethan's pulse quickened, his instincts screaming at him to get up, to run, to leave. But he stayed frozen, staring into the blackness. The noises intensified the next night. Now they weren't just whispers or breathing. They were whispers with words, words he couldn't quite make out, but they were there, unmistakable. The sound was so strange, like someone speaking in a language he didn't understand, but with an eerie, guttural tone that crawled under his skin. And the scratching, the incessant scratching. Ethan's mind raced with possibilities. Mice? Rats? He had to check. The next morning, after barely sleeping, he took a flashlight and crawled under the bed. The air was thick with dust, the ground cold and damp. The light from the flashlight barely illuminated anything beneath. There was no sign of an animal, no evidence of anything at all. It was empty, like it always had been. But the feeling of something watching him remained. That night the noises were worse. The whispers were louder, clearer, and much more frantic. Scratching like nails on wood, followed by a soft, wet slapping sound. Ethan lay rigid in bed, his eyes wide open, his body frozen in place. The bed creaked under the weight of something unseen, something that seemed to grow heavier with each passing moment. It was so close now, so near he could feel the coldness of its breath against his skin. And still, he couldn't move. He heard it, a voice, deep and harsh, rasping with desperation. "Help me." Ethan shot upright, his heart hammering in his chest. His throat went dry, his mind spinning. Who was that? What was it? He couldn't explain it, but the whispering words seemed to claw into his mind, filling it with dread, was coming from under the bed. He couldn't deny it any longer. There was something there. He rushed to the side of the bed, shining the flashlight beneath it with trembling hands. There was nothing, just dust and shadows. But he could feel it. The air was thick with it, oppressive and dark. Ethan had to do something. He couldn't stay here, in this room, in this house, knowing that whatever it was beneath him, in the dark, always waiting. He grabbed the broomstick from the corner of the room, his mind swirling in panic. He knelt beside the bed and prodded the broomstick under the frame, trying to dislodge whatever was hiding there. He pushed, shoved it around, waiting for some sort of movement, some sort of sign. His breath caught when the broomstick made contact with something soft, something that didn't belong. He pulled back quickly, his pulse racing. His skin crawled. The air was heavy with an electric tension. It felt like the room itself was holding its breath. But nothing happened. No movement, no sound, nothing. The house was silent. Ethan's heart was pounding in his ears as he slowly sat back down on the bed, staring at the darkened space beneath him. His mind whirled with doubt. Was it his imagination? Was he losing his grip on reality? The next night, the scratching returned. But now it was worse. The noises came at random intervals, growing louder with each passing second. The whispers, if they could even be called whispers, became clearer, more forceful. "I see you." He covered his ears, but it didn't help. The voice was inside his head, inside his thoughts. It was relentless, an unholy presence that wouldn't let go. He was no longer sure if it was even beneath the bed anymore. The feeling of being watched had grown to encompass the entire room, the walls pressing in as if the house itself was alive, squeezing the air from his lungs. He needed to leave. He needed to get out. But every time he thought about standing up, the thought of what might happen if he did paralyzed him. And then came the breathing. The heavy, laborious sound of it, slow and deep, like something old, ancient and hungry. It wasn't coming from under the bed anymore. It was coming from the corners of the room, from the dark shadows that seemed to stretch and shift. Ethan bolted out of bed, running for the door, his mind screaming for him to leave, to escape the suffocating terror. He reached the handle, but it wouldn't turn. The door was locked. He turned in a panic, his back pressed against the door as he frantically tried to unlock it. The breath grew louder, more labored, like something was crawling toward him in the dark. The air became colder, so cold it felt like his skin would freeze. The whisper started again, louder now, more insistent. "Come closer." Ethan couldn't move. His hands shook violently as he finally managed to wrench the door open. But as he stepped into the hallway, a figure, dark, hunched, with eyes that glowed like dying embers, stepped out from the shadows. The thing was no longer beneath the bed. It was no longer confined to the darkness of the room. It was everywhere. And it was coming for him. He screamed, but it was a sound swallowed by the darkness, swallowed by the silence of the house. The door slammed shut behind him. The house stood still, its walls whispering,